Today, we are going to be discussing how to save for your children's education and your retirement at the same time. It is important to properly plan for both, so tune in to hear tips to help you navigate through the challenge.
Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth-running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining me today. If you missed my last episode and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on my social media pages as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. And if you'd like to receive notifications on when my podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. Let me share a little bit about my guest today. Anna Sergunina has over 19 years of experience as a certified financial planner and is the CEO of Main Street Financial Planning, Inc. She is one of the nation's largest fee-only, project-based, planning-only focused companies that serve families with young children wanting to grow their wealth and make smart financial decisions along the way. Anna is a new mom to her 4-year-old son, Liam, and a wife to her husband, Yuri, of 18 years. Not only does she emphasize the challenges her clients are facing, but she uses her own personal and professional experience as a mom, wife, and business owner to help her clients live their best financial life and make smart financial decisions so they can have their dream career, a thriving business, a happy family, perfect health, and of course, the money to do it all. Anna is an advocate for financial education, and she's been featured in publications, Business Insider, Forbes, USA Today, NASDAQ, and Wall Street Journal. She was named a virtual force by Morningstar and recognized by Financial Advisor magazine as one of the top 10 young advisors to watch in 2017. She also teaches her flagship personal finance management course, Money Flow System, and engages with her audience weekly on her own Money Boss podcast and her personal brand site. So Anna, welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone, and hi, Candy. Very excited to be here. Thank you for such a long introduction.
Well, I did give quite a bit of your background, but why don't you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and why are you interested in discussing financial planning with my listeners today?
Yes, totally. So financial planning has been a passion of mine for the last 20 years, as you mentioned. And when I started, when I was a young girl, my goal was to become a doctor. And once I got into college and realized that it was going to take me way too long to do that, I decided that going in a route of personal finance, because that is something that I uncovered in my second year in college, was going to allow me to use the same skills, right, or ideas I had working with patients, right, or in the case of financial planning, clients, instead of helping them with, their health and everything that involves that. I do the same thing, but I help them with their finances and their, money decisions and everything around that. So I kind of transitioned that idea working with clients in the area of personal finance. Now, I'm very passionate about the topic because I think everybody would agree that every decision you would make ultimately will end up you thinking about financial part. So if we can be equipped with better skills of how to do that, and I didn't have those skills, unfortunately, growing up, but that's okay. I chose the path. And so that's the excitement and the passion I have for this profession. And two, I want to demystify this idea that financial planners are only for people who have money or for people who have made it or whatever stories you have heard. And that's actually really not true. Financial planners can work with regular people. This is sometimes how my clients describe themselves. Can you work with like a regular person like me? Sure, we can. And you should have one because that's how you achieve your financial goals or any goals. That's how you grow your wealth. Someone walking side by side with you and helping you navigate a complex area. So that's where
Right.
I love to connect all of those dots for my clients.
Well, all of us need to plan for our future, right? We need to plan for retirement. We don't all want to work till the day we die, right? So,
No.
the regular person, we still have to face that. One of the questions, though, that I want to ask is how do you help people plan for, obviously, planning for college and planning for their future? Because they might prioritize one over the other, thinking, well, I could plan for my retirement someday, but my kid's college is coming first. So why is that a mistake? Maybe if that is a mistake, or, what should people be thinking about when it comes to saving for college and future retirement plans?
Right. It's a very good question because there's a lot of pieces to put together. And I think it will all depend where you are on this journey, right? So if you're, I'll give you examples in, let's say, two phases. So if you're a parent like me who has a young child, my son is 4.5, it seems like, oh my gosh, I personally, right, have so many more years to go until we have to be looking at the college options and the cost. But as I think many of you would agree, time flies really fast. So that
Right.
is true, Candy. The college will happen a lot sooner than, let's say, our own retirement. Now, prioritizing is something that I advocate for my clients to think about when they look at their financial goals. So funding college for your kids' education or funding education is one of the goals that many people have. Same thing goes for retirement. So when I say prioritizing, I want you to start thinking the resources that you currently have, how can you allocate them in both directions, right? I'm sure you have other goals, but let's just, for example, that we're discussing here, let's just say there's two that you're targeting, because cost of college is increasing tremendously, right? But so is cost of our retirement, right? I want you to think of it that way too. I mean, look what happened with the inflation we've just had over the last year and a half, right? And the current economic environment. So everything is costing you more. So when you look at it that way, what is going to come first? Then you can assess the resources you have. And let's say, for example, you have $1,000 a month that you want to decide where you want to put, which savings bucket you want to put if you're on this trajectory. Now, you're a younger parent like myself, so I have more time to go. Looking at your timeline, and this is really like one of the secrets in understanding how to invest or where to save your money is when you understand your timeline. So if the goal in your timeline is going to happen sooner, then you probably, right, depending how much have you already saved, you may want to allocate more of these resources, that, let's say, that $1,000. Maybe you can put $600 into that bucket to pay for college, and the rest goes into your retirement. So what I'm trying to say here is that you do both, right? If you have the resources. Now, lots of different options exist how you can pay for your children's education. I've actually, interesting enough, I have my own podcast called Money Boss Podcast. And so I invite guests to talk about any kind of financial topics, but also any topics that are relating to parenthood, motherhood. And so I had a guest who was discussing the alternative education system. And so a lot of parents are starting to think about, so if traditionally the idea was like, okay, we need to fund a 4-year education for our kids, a lot of parents are starting to look elsewhere, right? Or look at other options of how they can do that. And so I want you to ask yourself those questions. Is the traditional way of saving and the traditional way of educating your kids is what you really want to do? Just because it's been done that way, it doesn't have to be. So when you can answer those questions first, then allocating whatever resources you have to devote to those goals becomes a lot easier. On the other hand, there are lots of different ways to pay for college, right? Your kids can get scholarships, there are grants available, there are student loans. And I know we can talk about the student loan topic for like another podcast episode with everything that's happening.
Right.
But I want you to, again, prioritizing. And some of you might be listening and thinking, oh my gosh, right, I'll do anything for my kids, which is very true. I'm with you on that. But you need to look a little bit beyond just that particular goal and think about, what if you can't retire, right? Or what if you can't work past a certain date and you haven't saved enough to provide for your lifestyle? What kind of changes are you going to make? Are you going to downsize? Are you going to sell your house? Are you going to move elsewhere? Are you going to change your lifestyle? So all of these things come at cost in making a decision that's going to come sooner. So I would start with that to begin with, and get involved with your kids as well, right? And maybe it's difficult to do it when you have a 4.5-year-old, but if your kids are older, and I have clients on both ends, right? The kids are older, maybe they're entering high school. You probably have a lot better idea. What are they like? What kind of education, right? They might be more open for. Maybe the traditional school isn't what you want, them to do, and what might they be able to contribute. So, there's steps to all of these phases, but I don't want all of you to assume that you certainly should just straight out, put all of your eggs into one basket. Now, with the college savings, I'm going to add one more point. With the college savings vehicles that exist, most of you have heard of what's called a 529 college savings account. There has been some changes recently, actually at the beginning of 2023, to the rules of how you can distribute money if they're not used directly for college-related expenses. So I want to highlight for you that there are options for you if, in case, for example, your child doesn't go to college, right? Or they get a scholarship. So you have ways to use those monies elsewhere and also maybe potentially help you fund your retirement goals if all of these things exist. So just do know that there are options, and they're becoming a lot more open as what they used to be years ago.
Right. Well, I think one thing for people to remember too is the compounding interest, right? And the importance of starting earlier too, so that the money can build, more money for you. So no matter what you're saving in, start earlier than later, because, time is your friend, in that route. But another thing I had heard at one point too was, yes, and you touched on this too, there are other funding sources available for college, but when you're retiring, you're not going to have other funding sources, generally speaking, right? And so it is important to really put your future as a priority, and we all get it. Like, we want to help our kids, but we could actually be hurting our kids in the long run too if we are not putting money away for our retirement, or maybe even long-term care insurance or something like that too, because then the burden goes back to our children. So even though we think we're doing a favor, it might backfire. So what are your thoughts on that?
Totally. And I remember when I started my financial planning career, and one of the mentors said at the beginning, and I've heard him use these examples a lot of times, in client meetings, is very similar to what you're saying, is that you can finance college, right? Let's say you don't have enough resources and your kids are going to college. Like, you're faced with figuring out how to pay for that. And, perhaps the kids can have some skin in the game. So you can finance that, right? They can finance that, get into student loans, or maybe work part-time, but you can't finance your own retirement, right? So what are you going to do to make those adjustments? And so it really stuck in my head, because when my parents were faced with the decision to pay, I have a younger brother, for both of our educations, they didn't have enough resources, right, to do that. So a lot of it was put on us to contribute. And so I grew up with the idea, being okay with the idea that I had to contribute my own resources, my own time, right? I was looking for scholarships. So this alternative funding, right? And that was okay. Now, I had married someone who had gotten the full ride scholarship, and in his mind, it's like, this is how we fund education, right? So this idea of saving hasn't really we are saving, right, for our son, but it's like, well, he's going to be so good that he's going to get a full ride scholarship when he goes to college. I'm like, great, but what if he doesn't? Right. So I just suggest for you to be a little bit more open about ideas of how you're going to pay for it. And this feeling, right, that you have to pay for it yourself comes to what you were just saying, Candy. Like, how do you balance the two? Because if you put all your eggs into that, what is going to be left for you, and how is that going to impact your kid's responsibility in the future. Because on the other hand, long-term care costs are tremendous, right? Cost of retirement is increasing. So it's such a balancing act. But even so, if you're like younger parents like myself, knowing that you have time, you can still start making these steps in deciding, right? What are you going to do along the way? So don't feel like you're left out because there are so many unknowns and variables that can come up all the way.
Well, I would like to have you also talk about, the FAFSA, right? When you're filling out for financial aid and they're looking at resources and what does, the student themselves have? What do the parents have? Do they look at, the college savings that you have and the retirement? Like, what do they take into consideration as to what you have available before they even fund any type of loans, grants, anything like that too? So is it better then, again, to maybe have in retirement because it doesn't count where maybe a college plan does? Can you touch on that?
Yes, totally. So student assets are a lot of, because there's a formula how they assess, because they assess both assets and income, right? So this whole FAFSA process. So student assets, right? And so actually, something to clarify, 529 college savings plans are not students' assets. They are parents' accounts. They are intended for college, right? But they're not student assets. Now, one of the tricks over the years that's been popular with families is, for example, for grandparents to have these accounts because they're not even in the formula, right? Because you don't have to report these external accounts. Now, when the grandparents start to distribute money or start to use the funds to help offset the cost, then the income is going to be assessed in overall formula. But you have assets that have more value, right? Or they're assessed heavily versus the income. So again, it's a balancing act. So if we go back to the beginning, the student assets, if they have any kind of assets, savings accounts, UTMAs, UGMAs, those are minor types of accounts, those are going to be all included in this calculation. And so I would focus on thinking through what is there. And if student is earning income, right? Like if they have part-time job, that's all is calculated in this formula. And then you have your typical 529 college savings account. There in the past, there have been other types of accounts, but I think this is the most popular today. Or a lot of parents, and I see this a lot more popular lately, they sort of do the combination of the two. Because they're not sure. They said, I'm not sure if my child is going to go to college, so I don't want to overfund the 529 account because it is going to be the one that's heavily assessed in this calculation for any financial aid. So they put some of the difference of their savings into the regular investment account that later on, right, if it's not used or not needed, would be spent on other goals at the same time, including their own retirement. So I would be looking at all of these pieces and kind of deciding what makes the most sense. Also, so when you apply for FAFSA the first year, and I am by far not a FAFSA application expert, I just do know what I hear from clients. The income that parents make in the 2 previous years is what has the most impact. So if you have a job that, for example, pays you bonuses, right? Or if you get, like a lot of my clients have equity compensation. So if you get stock in the form of RSUs or options, maybe there's ways of how some of this can be deferred, right? Creatively, so that you're not having to show, because you have to show your tax return, you're not having to show this gigantic income, right, 2 years prior, because that's also, if they're seeing that parents have income, on their tax returns, then that is calculated heavily in the formula that figures out how much aid you're going to get. And aid could be grants, aid could be subsidized student loans, and well, scholarships is another category, but that's something to consider.
Right. And I did have prior episodes too talking about FAFSA specifically, and I talked to a college financial planner. So if anyone wants more information on that topic, definitely check out other podcast episodes I have or reach out. We can send you links. But one of the things I was thinking about while you were talking as well is skin in the game, right, for the student. And so I think sometimes if you have to pay your way, or you're going to have this debt when you come out of college, you're more focused, right, on getting things done, doing well in school, right? And finishing when you can, like as quickly as you can too, not taking 5 or 6 years maybe, but maybe doing it in that 4 or 4.5. And so sometimes I think that's an incentive as well for the student, for them to kind of grow up and take responsibility and say, if I'm paying for this, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing a really good job at it as well. Versus, like you said, sometimes it's not the case for everybody, but sometimes when you're just given everything, you don't really focus as much.
I agree. Skin in the game would probably incentivize anyone to contribute to their fullest. One of the interesting concepts I also have learned over the years, and I've seen families put it in practice, but sometimes instead of, for whatever reasons, maybe they couldn't save enough, or maybe they really wanted just to get the kids involved. The family would say, okay, if you were going to, so we'll pay for your college education, but here's the scheme. Once you graduate, and throughout the 4 years that you're in college, you take the student loans. Once you graduate, and if you were an A student throughout the 4 years, we will pay 100% of your loans off. If you were a B student, we'll pay, let's say, 75% of your student loans, and you'll be responsible for the difference. If you're just wanted to have fun all the 4 years and you were like a C student, it's on you. And I love that thought, because you know what? Even though if you're going through the experience, but it teaches you to be responsible, right? It teaches you to commit to working through, but also like early on, the money lessons that I think a lot of young adults need to be aware of is really powerful. So I've had a few families that have done that. I think there's three so far. I think there was one that had 100%, so it was a student, so they're still paying off the loans, which is great, right? They can take their time to do that. And these are not parent loans. I'm not talking about parent loans. I'm talking about student loans, right? And some of them got unsubsidized, so it helped. And then another family had a B student. So they're, fair, and they're paying 75% of whatever that loan balance was. But that's the skin in the game example that anyone can implement.
Right. So if someone is listening and saying, well, I'm still a little confused, I don't know how much I should put into each, and I want to talk to a professional, like, why is it in their best interest to really seek someone like you in this industry who can really help them navigate the complexities of this whole thing of saving for college, saving for retirement?
Well, I think for one is making sure you don't make a mistake. And because there's complexity in certain rules that exist, where you put your money, like an example of a 529 account, what options do you have? What's the best way for you to fund it? And two, how do you invest? Because you said this at the beginning, Candy, compound interest is the magic, right? And so how do we maximize the time that we have, and then the resources that we're going to invest? So if we can marry the two, that makes the whole thing work. So if you can invest the right or save in the right vehicle at the beginning and invest it in the right scheme or structure, then at the end, right, once you get to your goal, you're gonna be a lot closer to it, or you're gonna reach it, versus if you dabble around. So someone like myself and the team that I have help you sort through those options. We don't sell financial products. We don't manage your assets. We help you make a decision. We help you identify your goal, and then figure out what that plan is going to be so you can get there.
Right. Well, I heard the example of, if you're going to go from where you live to New York, right, you're going to follow a map, whether it's GPS or, you're still old school and you've got it, an old map. So you know where you're going, right? And things might change. There might be a detour you have to take at some point because there's road construction or whatever, but at least you have an idea of where you're going. And so same thing with financial planning, right? You can create a plan, and it's not set in stone, right? It can be modified as things change. Your situation might change, a life, change, whatever happens. So you can still go in and modify as necessary, but at least you have a guideline that helps you get on the path to where you want to go. So I guess talk maybe about that too, a little bit about maybe what it takes when you are doing a plan and what changes you can make.
No, I love that. I mean, it's actually interesting because our financial plans, we call our financial plans money roadmaps. for this exact same reason. And I want all of listeners here to understand that just because you have a financial plan or you've created one at some point in your life, that doesn't mean that you're going to get everything accomplished on it, because life changes. And unfortunately, I've seen ton of examples where clients thought that that's all it took. It's like, I've got a plan, I'm good to go. But when they came back years later to update and review, they realized that they were no near as close to what they said initially they wanted to accomplish. And so that's, to me, is the worst that can happen to any of us. So navigating your life with this tool and constantly coming back to it, it does not take a lot of time. And I think that's also like one of the thoughts that people may be having. I don't have time for this. And that's okay, right? You don't have to be on it, in it every day of your life. But periodically, usually we have clients come back at least once a year. Every 6 months is more common. But looking at all of these different pieces, because it's complex, there's lots of pieces that you have to put together. We all are very used to filing our taxes once a year. So I keep thinking, like, well, why can't we have the same mindset of we need to look at our finances in the global view, right? At least once a year. So it's a tool that should be used, and if it's created properly, it helps you make decisions. That's, to me, the most valuable piece, because you will be faced with situations where you have to make a decision. And so if you want to make the right decision, and I call them smart decisions, then that's where it's going to benefit you the most.
Right. Well, I think too, when it comes to figuring out a financial plan, because a lot of times people will say, well, I can't really afford to put a lot away right now. But when they really sit down and look at what they're spending their money on, right? So what type of phone service, do you have? What plan do you have? Or how many cable type channels are you paying for, or do you have Hulu and Netflix and the Disney Channel or whatever, right? And so when you sit down and really look at what you're spending on, I think it's eye-opening, because people forget sometimes. They might sign up for something and forget, or think like, well, I just get a $5 Starbucks coffee, once a week or whatever, but not realizing how much that is in a year, or, figure that for 5 years, right? If you were able to take some of that is kind of discretionary spending and put it away for, again, either college or your future retirement, you're going to be a lot better off in the long run and have money for things versus it just kind of going. So I think that's important too, to have someone sit down with you to really help you make that decision, because sometimes you don't do it on your own. Right?
I agree. And it's probably the most exciting exercise for me is and this is actually one of the first steps in creating a financial plan, is to sit down and look at where, for clients, where they spend their money. It's every time, right, when we do that, the client will come back and say, no, this is not how much money I spend. But when you look at the reality, because again, we're all so busy, life is happening. And you're right, we don't know that we have all the 5 subscriptions for our TV, and, we don't watch any of them. So it's like, what's the reality? Because a lot of times it's not what we think. And when we're constantly telling ourselves, and it's also, a lot of it also is a mindset shift. Like when we're telling ourselves, like, we don't have the money to do this, whatever it is, save for college or save more for our retirement. And at the same time, you're not properly using your resources, and you don't even know what's happening. Like it's not going to click. It's not going to work. You can, kind of go in circles with this, but when you look at it and you realize, like, oh my gosh, this could be changed. And two, like, one of the, messages I want everyone to hear is that you don't always or necessarily have to, like, cut your expenses or reduce your lifestyle. Like, it's helpful to assess what it is that, where your money is going, because at the same time, you can think about how can you increase your income. Right? What other things can you do? Because the world these days is so different, where we all have the opportunity to maybe make more money doing other things, right? If we have certain skills, or maybe we can apply for a different job. So it isn't just about, oh my gosh, I have to cut out my whatever it is that you love to do in your budget. You don't. It's not, unless it's really necessary. So it just opens up your eyes to see what's happening. And if you looked at it once a year that way, initially assessed it and looked at it at least once a year, I think you're going to be in a much better spot than if you were just putting your head in the sand. And two, there are tools that exist. You can have an app on your phone, or like a program like QuickBooks. Maybe if you have a business, that could be a good tool for you to use and have things for you to be updated automatically. So all you have to do is just check. That's the
Right.
the magic that happens when you're staying on the top of it from time to time.
Right. Right. Well, I know we're running short on time today, and there's so much more we could even talk about. I mean, one of the thoughts that I even had too was all the change that's going on with, will, the college loans be paid or will they not be paid? And we don't have time to go
Mhm.
into all of that, but obviously that's a consideration into, do you save or do you put for your future? But I would love for you to share, like, do you have an offer that you can give to our listeners, and how can they connect with you if they have more questions or they want to find out more?
Yes, totally. So for everyone listening here, I think everyone thinking about how to balance all of these questions and where to devote their resources would be best suited if they downloaded our parent money checklist that gives you a platform to think through, like, what are my priorities? Where can we focus on now? And where am I on this journey? Because I mentioned you could be anywhere on this journey of raising your kids. And so helping you kind of decide what goes first would be served best if you go to parentmoneychecklist.com and download our checklist and kind of get started with those questions. For any financial planning related questions, if you want to sit down and just even figure out if a financial planner is someone you could work with, because it's a partnership when you start something like that. You can find me at mainstreetplanning.com, and I have a team of other certified financial planners that you could choose from.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Anna, for being a guest on my show and talking about this topic. I know it's very important. A lot of people have on their minds, trying to balance it all. And so I thought it was important to really have the conversation. And of course, we only got started on the topic. There's so much more that we could discuss, but I really appreciate your sharing your expertise with my listeners.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I hope you found this topic interesting and enjoyed the informative discussion. Would you please share my show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform? I'd really appreciate your support. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to my guest at any of the links that they shared, or you could send me a message at media@abandp.com. I hope you can join me for my next interview. And remember, you can connect with me on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my website is abandp.com. This episode is sponsored by Affordable Bookkeeping and Payroll Services. If you are overwhelmed trying to handle the financial aspects of your business, ABP is here to help. Contact us today to discuss your needs at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.